Welcome to the Black Lodge Games review of Basic Role-Playing Universal Game Engine from Chaosium. Now, this is an excellent book. It is not, however, a game, in my opinion. It's not something that you can just pull off the shelf and say, hey guys, let's play BRP tonight. There's a lot that's in this book. It is very useful for the purpose that it serves, but this is not something that you can just take off of the shelf and begin to run a campaign with. So what is BRP? Well, like it says on the title, it's a universal game engine. It's basically a toolkit that is used to construct a game from all of these different pieces inside of it that you can run in any genre. Whether this is going to be a gritty fantasy game, a high fantasy game, something that takes place in the 1920s or the 1950s, sci-fi, superheroes, anything that you can pretty much think of to make a game, you can use what's in this book to design it basically from scratch. But they have the core engine of the game in here for you. The basic resolution mechanics for BRP is something you're probably going to be familiar with if you've played Call of Cthulhu or RuneQuest or Mithras or any other D100 game. And that is a tremendous strength of this book. It has a great engine. It is skill-based. You can do lots and lots of stuff with it. It's very flexible, but it's not something that I recommend for people to just go out and buy to play BRP. That's not how it works. So the book itself is incredible quality. I mean, this is Chaosium. They have great budget, great artists, everything. The book is super solid. It's hardbound. It's got a stitched binding. It's got a ribbon bookmark right here. That's nice gold color. Everything that I like in a book, it has. It does not have glossy pages, which is wonderful. The pages are uncoated. They don't even have a matte finish on them. It's very thick paper. This is a book that'll last a lifetime. So you can buy this once and you can reference it whenever you want on the shelves. I actually have played BRP. I have used this to run a game before, and it worked very well. It did exactly what I needed it to, but it took some preparation to actually make that happen. And so when you open this book, we'll go through kind of the table of contents real quick. You do get a nice introduction that tells you what a role-playing game is. Most of it is pretty good. They don't quite get everything right, but it is one of the better introductions to what role-playing games are. This is a section that most people skip in role-playing games when they read these books because everybody has a conception of what they think a role-playing game is to begin with. This is a section that when we release our own game, this will be mandatory reading and we will do it right. But they get pretty close. It's pretty good. If you want to do the immersive role-playing thing, oh man, this is a great place to start. The D100 systems, I think, are absolutely great for that. They're very granular, and since they are skill-based, you can create characters that don't have to strictly conform to a particular archetype. You can do that in this, but this gives you a little more freedom. However, like I said, there's no defined setting. This is not a game per se. This is a game design toolkit. You then have character creation rules in Chapter 2, skills, which is going to go over how to use them, what they do, the different professions that they're associated with, powers, which includes everything from your D&D style magic to a more Baroque sorcery system, horrible and horrific mutations that can make you do things, and superpowers and psychic powers. The only thing that is directly missing from that, I think, is there's nothing for cybernetics. You can use things like the psychic powers and the mutations and some of the magic to kind of create cybernetic powers out of that, but it's something that I think is actually kind of a gap in this. It's supposed to be universal, and that's a genre that's been around for a very, very long time at this point. And I was kind of disappointed that it wasn't in there because the game that I ran using BRP needed cybernetics, which is a little frustrating. And then you have the actual game system, how everything works, how to run combat, spot rules, which is going to cover all sorts of stuff, and we'll get to that. A massive chapter on equipment that's going to cover everything from, like primitive weapons all the way up till like laser guns and rail guns and spaceships and vehicles. Chapter on game mastering, how to construct settings, and how to, I think in here it also kind of talks about choosing different rule sets for different settings. A list of predefined and pre-created antagonists and creatures for you to fight, and some appendices. And of course, it has an index, which we love. We always love having an index. Like I said, the paper on this is really thick. This book physically is going to be thicker than something like RuneQuest, Roleplaying, and Glorantha. However, it is a lower page count than that book. But the art is excellent. The writing is excellent. It's very clear, no typos or anything. They tell you a little bit about their different settings that they have, different games. They've got, Pendragon and RuneQuest and Call of Cthulhu, games that many of you will be familiar with. Summary of all the different terms, game terms. This is a great thing to start off by reading. You don't actually want to skip the introduction. I know people skip the introductions all the time, but you really shouldn't. There's important stuff in this. When it comes to character creation, and again, this is kind of what I'm saying, it's an uncoated paper. I hate glossy paper. If this was glossy, you would not be able to see this. The angle of the light would be completely washing it out. However, I do like a matte coating because I do think a matte coating brings a lot more contrast and color out. They appear a bit faded. There's still tons of detail. They look beautiful, but I do prefer an actual matte coating to paper. And if you look at like RuneQuest, the current edition does have a coating on the paper, and the just the blacks and the colors are much, much deeper and is much more satisfying to look at. And the art in RuneQuest is so good. But you have a couple, just starting out, you have different power levels because since this is a game system that can be used to design your own game, that is basically what I see as the point and the use of having this book. You have characters that are kind of normal, what you would say regular people, heroic characters, and epic characters. Epic characters, oh yes, and superhuman. So superhuman is what you're going to use for like superheroes and whatnot. And we'll get to talking about superheroes a little bit later. But creating a character, this is what I'm talking about when I'm saying you can't just pull this off the shelf and say, hey guys, let's play BRP. Step 1, name and characteristics, has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 optional rule sets associated with step 1. This really is something that as a game master, even if you're just going to run a one shot, which is what I did, you have to make the choices on which of these are going to be used. And telling your players, hey, get out the BRP manual. We're going to use this optional system, that optional system, and that optional system. It's a hard sell. It's not fun to do that. So what I did instead was I had the setting in mind. I had the milieu of the game in mind. I went through and made pre-generated characters for the people that I wanted to play in the scenario that I had created. And the scenario that I created was for a game that I've been thinking about for over a decade. It's something we will get to eventually. We've got other projects in the pipeline before that, but it's not quite a cyberpunk setting. It's more of a cypherpunk setting. It's more of taking the kind of more interesting aspects of crypto-anarchism and some futurism and projecting what things might look like a couple of decades from now and a really interesting science fiction setting. And so I used BRP to do that because there's no rule set that really covers what I wanted to do. So I was able to take bits and pieces from this book and cobble together a coherent rule set and some interesting stuff to run that session. And it was fucking awesome. But I had to go through and make the characters myself because I wasn't going to try and sell the people on making their own characters and going through all of these different loops. Because a lot of these optional rule systems, it's like, okay, this one is going to be on page 32. This one is going to be on page 96. There's a lot of cross-referencing that you'll have to go through because there are many, many, many tools in this toolbox. And that's not a bad thing. It is a good thing. It's just a bad thing if you wanted to try to sell players on playing this game tonight. That's not going to work. In our last review, we were talking about Shadowdark. One of the big positives about that game is you can just roll up characters and start playing with people who've never role-played in their life and get going like that. You can't do that with BRP. And next, you actually have a character sheet. And I hate this character sheet. And part of the reason is that it has to cover everything. This is a generalized system. So you have PowerPoints and fatigue and sanity, and PowerPoints, they might not be in your game because they might be associated with rules that you're not actually going to use. I really don't like the way that the skills are laid out. I wish it was just a master list that was all in alphabetical order instead of being broken into communications, manipulation, mental, and perception. Because if I say, I'd actually like you to make a research roll. Research is under perception. I would have assumed research would have been under mental. This is something that's come up when I've run this. You're looking through and it's like, okay, where is that on my character sheet? It's very kind of annoying. You've also got certain derived characteristics under the physical section. These are also skills. Your fly skill, which would be like piloting and flying different vehicles or maybe flying a dragon, something like that, is going to be dex times 4% or half of your dexterity, things like that. It's It's a little confusing. I prefer the way that Mithras does it, where when you've rolled up your statistics, those then contribute to the baseline of all of your basic skills, and then you just add professional skills on top of that. But it's going to be similar to something like Mithras, which is no shock. Mithras used to be RuneQuest. RuneQuest is part of the BRP family, and in that you're going to have different skill sets and multiple stages of character creation where you're adding additional points to your skills. It's not entirely a point-buy system. There is a full point-buy variant of the rules in here, but it's a mix of random generation of your statistics and then players choosing their skills and their skill ratings. You have a great character creation summary here. You just basically go across the page here to get all the steps. But again, you as the game master, if you want to run something from this, have to decide which rule sets you're using. And it tells you what do the characteristics do, what are characteristics roles, which might be things like almost like a saving throw in a way, like an agility roll. Whenever a feat of deftness, balance, or agility is called for and no appropriate skill exists, use an agility roll to measure success. So that your agility roll will be your dexterity rating times 5, and then you just roll a D100. If you roll under that number, then you succeed. This entire game system is based on a D100 skill-based roll. So if my skill rating is 75% in a particular skill, and I roll D100, as long as I've hit 75% or below, I succeed. The lower that I go, the more that I'm going to get something, a chance of like a critical or a special success, and the higher that I roll above it, closer to 100, the more likely it is that I've done something like fumble. And they've got rules and optional rules for all of that stuff in here. You've also got things like optional rules for hit points by location, and this is something that I love in these games. I don't want to play a D100 game that doesn't have hit locations, and this is something where people tend to get tripped up, but this is an optional system that if you're going to use BRP at all, I really think you should use the hit locations because it provides like resolution and detail in what's happening in the moment that you don't get from strictly rolling against an armor class and then rolling damage against a hit point pool. If you get hit locations, if you get hit, someone severs an artery on my leg or something like that, that gives me a lot of information about how to role play. It helps me to imagine what's happening in the moment. And it's really easy to use. People tend to think that adding hit locations is going to slow down play, but here's a little hack for you. You have your hit locations written down on your character sheet, even the BRP character sheet that I don't like. They have hit locations right here, and they tell you when you roll for the location, say I've succeeded on an attack, I roll a d20, and if I roll a 19 to 20, I've hit you in the head. If I roll a 5 or 8, I've hit you in the left leg. This is not hard, and you can simplify this to a single roll. You just roll 2d10 and 1d20 at the same time. You get success or failure on the attack roll, and you get a hit location as to whether or not you hit them, where you hit them. It's all there. And if you want to get really fancy, you can add your damage dice in there. Roll everything at the same time. It takes no extra time. So for those of you out there saying hit locations slow things down, you're dead wrong, and you're actually kind of missing out on something. I think it's an optional system that shouldn't be optional in this toolkit. But this book gives you everything you need to know about how to run the basic kind of core thing that goes on in BRP. But it offers you a ton of customization. Like you have things in character creation where you can use this or not. You have distinctive features where you roll on a table and you actually get some little quirk about the character. Whether it's your bearing, your bearing might be angry or swaggering. Your torso might be barrel-like, or you are missing a nipple. Things like that. Just these little kind of bits of detail and flavor that add to it. That's quite fun. You have rules for wealth. You have the different professions you can choose. And when you choose a profession, this is going to give you a bundle of skills that you can add skill points to. And they have professions across basically every genre that you could want. If you want to play a villain, you can be a journalist. If you want to be a hero, you can play a noble. You can do an occultist, a pilot, a lawyer, a gambler. There's all sorts of professions related to things like being a soldier or a writer, a technician. There's just a lot to choose from here. And this is going to give you a starting point for skills that are associated with those things without locking you into being that thing. You don't have to be only wizard and I can't swing a sword to save my life. This is an advantage of the skill-based systems that I really, really like, is that since it's not a game that's based on playing archetypes necessarily, you get to actually create a character. It's a little more grounded than the sort of limited nature of games like D&D. And it's not to say that games like D&D don't have their place. I enjoy D&D-like games. I enjoy games that have archetypes and classes, but there's problems. There's costs and benefits to everything. And one of the costs associated with playing in a game with classes is that you get very locked into a very narrow archetype and path, and it's really hard to kind of break out of that. And a lot of times, if you try to break out of that in those sorts of games, you end up creating this kind of nothing character, or they're like this kind of special snowflake, like, yeah, I'm a wizard, but I'm super jacked. And it's out of tone with the game itself. The D100 systems don't have that assumption baked in at all. And it's really more about creating a person within a world. And that person may have a wide variety of skills, or they may be very specialized in something, but they're not locked in necessarily to an archetype. You have a chapter on all of the skills, how to use them, skill lists by category, alphabetically listed skills. They tell you a lot of different things. They'll tell you what page they're on if you're looking for them, and then descriptions of each skill, how they work, and what they can allow you to actually do. This is all the stuff that's going to be extremely important for character creation if you're creating antagonists and monsters. Even things like status skills, social status, and character wealth. How your skills actually affect the way in which your character is perceived in their society at large. And then you get a section on the powers. And this is a pretty interesting thing because there's a lot here. You have magic, which is going to be sort of your classic fantasy sort of spells that you're all going to be familiar with, like casting. It's not called Magic Missile, but things like Magic Missile. It's a blast spell. You can create light and darkness. All of those things that we're all very familiar with. And then you have mutations, which are modifications or special abilities that accentuate or expand capabilities beyond human norms, like extra limbs, toxins, or a heightened sense of smell. Unlike other power sets, some mutations are not beneficial and are even hindrances. So mutations can be powers. They can also be things that you can just use as curses against people. You have psychic abilities, which are excellent. I mean, these are things like clairvoyance and pyrokinesis and telekinesis, all sorts of things associated with your kind of psionic powers almost. And then you have sorcery. And this type of magic consists of a short magical incantation that cause a supernatural effect. Sorcery automatically works except when successfully resisted and can have different levels of effectiveness. A sorcerer can change the spells they memorize day to day, picking desired ones from a larger repertoire. Seeking new spells is a part of playing a sorcerer. Beyond that, you get superpowers, and these are going to be for playing superheroes. Conspicuously absent from this list, and what I was actually pretty disappointed in because I needed it for the game that I was going to run, is like cybernetics. They don't have that. Now, you can cobble together a cybernetic system out of the various abilities, psychic abilities, mutations, and superpowers, even some of the magic. You can reskin those as cybernetics, but it was kind of interesting to me that they didn't have cybernetics built into this, since BRP's been around forever and cyberpunk has been an established genre with lots and lots of different games taking place in cyberpunk worlds for decades. So it was a little odd that it wasn't directly addressed in here. But you get rules for how all of these different things work. Each system functions a little bit differently. Again, it's all going to be on that D100 resolution, but there is different considerations for different magic systems and different powers. And you're going to get descriptions of all of the different powers and spells that you have. And so, yeah, exactly. Like we have light, lightning, seal, it's like use this to bond the edges of any two inanimate objects which are at rest and fitted to one another, such as a door in a door frame, a lid on a box. This is like wizard lock, basically. But you can also use it to like glue things together. There's a little more flexibility in some of these, but these are powers that you're going to be very, very familiar with. Mutations are a little bit different. You can get some sort of natural camouflage, congenital disease. You're a disease carrier, or you have group intelligence, keen senses, natural armor, natural weaponry. Like you could use natural weaponry to make some sort of a cybernetic thing. Pheromones, reduced senses. You've got keen senses. This could also be used for cybernetics. Lots of psychic abilities. So there's a ton of things that you can use to make different worlds and different milieus. It's all supported by this, which is a big, big strength of this game. And then you have the different rules for sorcery, which is going to tell you exactly how this works. You do have different spot rules for them as well. If you're looking at this and going like, this is just too many rules, the whole point is that this whole book is a book of rules, and you're not meant to use all of them at the same time. I think you probably couldn't, even if you wanted to. There's not like, how do I play BRP? Rules is written. That's the decision of the game master. That's the decision of the person either designing the game or the scenario that you're going to be playing as to what is actually included. And this is a pretty interesting thing because it's got a lot of stuff from their major games that they've released. Like almost all of this stuff about how the game works is in RuneQuest. It's in Call of Cthulhu. You don't have things like the rune magic from RuneQuest, but you do have the sanity system from Call of Cthulhu. So if you wanted to make your own game that's sort of like Call of Cthulhu, or you thought the sanity mechanic from that really was something worthwhile and that would fit in a different game that's not related to Call of Cthulhu at all, you've got that in here. And the cool part about this is that this entire book is published under the Orc license. So you can make content, you can make and sell your own games based off of the stuff in this book. You obviously can't use the artwork or reference their trademarks or use their trade dress or anything like that, but the rules themselves can all be used to design your own game. And the D100 system is really robust, and it supports a lot of different styles of play. Superpowers as well. This is something where I think the game doesn't really work. Superhero games are very difficult to actually model because you have characters that go, range from being Spider-Man or Batman even, who are basically like, Batman's just a guy. He's top tier human being, but he does not have superpowers. And then you go to something like Superman, who can fly faster than the speed of light. He can do basically anything. He has almost no limits. And these skill-based systems, in my opinion, they just don't support that kind of play. You can play superheroes, but I would not design a superhero game out of BRP. And I think if you are interested in playing a superhero game, Ascendant by Autark is going to be an excellent choice because that actually does have a system where the math is all logarithmic that accounts for these different power scales. It's absolutely nuts. And that is also not a rules light game. But you can pilfer these powers for different types of milieus. And you can do stuff like this, where you've got like Hitler basically, levitating off the ground, about to use some sort of blast power against the Fantastic Four America guy stretching his arms over the battlefield. You can do things like that. The game does support that. But for a strictly superhero milieu, I don't think it quite works. And you can pilfer a lot of this stuff for cybernetics as well. Again, I just wish that cybernetics had been included from the get-go. And so then you get the entire section on the game system itself. How do you evaluate success and failure? How do you do things and account for things that might not necessarily be covered by a given skill? And so this is where you get the resistance table. And this is something that has appeared in a lot of Chaosium games, and it's really useful. And this is the sort of thing that you might use. Like one of the examples they give is if your character needs to try to push a boulder, and they have it's not, there's no boulder pushing skill. You might use like brawn or something like that. The skill itself isn't going to tell you anything about the boulder. The boulder might be huge. It might be relatively small. How does your character actually fit with that, and how can you interact with that? And so for the resistance table, one of the examples they have is there's a potency 7 venom. So you've been poisoned by something that's potency 7, pretty high, and your character has a constitution of 15. There's an active characteristic, which is going to be the venom itself, and a passive characteristic, which is your constitution. And so you can use this table for a wide variety of things. It's really, really useful. But we'll go for a potency 17 venom, and then we're going to go to the passive characteristic is on this axis here. Your constitution is 15, and we just find where they meet. And that's going to be, this says 60. If I roll D100, 60 or under, I'm going to resist that poison. Or if this was me pushing the boulder, if I roll 60 or under, I push the boulder successfully. And so there's things where there are ranges where there's just a range of automatic success. It's like the boulder is actually really small, or it's hollow, something like that, or it's massive. And there's just no way that my character could possibly succeed on this. It just tells you that. It's a very, very simple way of resolving some of these things. You have rules for opposed skill rolls, skill ratings over 100%. Which is great. This is something that's also in Mithras, and I really, really like. You have fate points. There's a million different things. Rules for covering time and movement, terrain and weather modifications, encumbrance, and clear descriptions of how your characters advance in this. And the standard way that people advance in BRP, it's going to be very gradual. And there's actually kind of a little bit of a problem with this. And this is, if you've played Call of Cthulhu, RuneQuest, anything, you'll know how this works. Say you're in a fight. I use my combat skill and I successfully hit someone. I'm going to write a little check mark next to that skill on my character sheet. And at the end of the session, I'm going to have an opportunity to roll and see if that skill improves. The problem with that is that it tends to favor only the skills that are the most useful in certain situations. And so a lot of times games are going to focus on things like combat or investigation, and you're going to be using the same skills over and over and over, and those skills are going to grow and the rest of yours are going to kind of atrophy. I don't really like that. I prefer the way that it's done in Mithras, where you get to choose which skills that you're going to upgrade. And sometimes that's combat skills and things related to that, but other times it's not. You're going to be increasing skills that will be useful in certain situations, but you're not using them enough for them to get better. And so you can get stuck in a situation in the BRP way of doing things where those skills do come up sometime and they're still at what your base character was at 10 sessions ago, which is not always great. But you also have optional rules for skill training and things like that. We have aging, there's rules for everything. And then you get a full breakdown of how to run combat. And this is going to include combat from things like melee weapons, missile weapons, firearms, everything. You've also got in here, this is something I found pretty interesting, is the attack and defense matrix, which is going to tell you, okay, the attack roll and the parry roll were both a critical. The defender parries and dodges the damage, no other result. But what happens if the attack roll criticals and the parry roll fumbles? The attack achieves a critical success. Attack does full damage plus normal damage modifier, or the attacker may choose a special success instead. Defender's armor value does not apply. Defender rolls on the appropriate fumble table. And so this is a way of adding a lot more interesting things that can happen and play out in a particular combat with a particular blow. And this is clearly where the system of special effects was developed in Mithras. And the special effects system in Mithras is phenomenal. It's fantastic. And I think that it's superior to this in a lot of ways. But Mithras is very much focused on doing a Bronze Age fantasy setting. This is supposed to be used for kind of everything else. Again, this book, it's meant to be a toolkit, and it's a big toolkit. There's a lot of stuff in here. But I find that if you just wanted to say, like, I just need some rules to run a modern game, but I don't need all of this, and I don't want to read, this 250-page book, I'd suggest taking a look at Mithras Imperative, which is free on DriveThruRPG. It's only about 80 pages, and it's really, really, really tight. It doesn't have as much stuff in here as this. This has so much more magic and powers and everything that you can do there. But just as a base rule set, the Mithras Imperative system is opinionated. It's chosen its systems. You don't have to go through the options. But if you need the options, if you need the toolkit, this is kind of an essential reference. And even though we are working on projects that are based on Mithras Imperative, I still reference BRP all the time, looking at things that might be useful to kind of pilfer from this. This is perfect. And that's one of the benefits of this being orc licensed, as well as Mithras Imperative being orc licensed, is that you can kind of mix and match things. And this is an area where I think Mithras really gets this kind of differential role right. And BRP, it's not clunky, but it's just not as good. And so on the next page, you've got, melee weapon parries and fumbles, attack fumbles, missile attack fumbles, all these different things, these cool things that can happen in combat. I really, really like this stuff. It's a lot more interesting than simply hitting a bag of hit points. And sometimes hitting a bag of hit points is fun. There's nothing wrong with that. There are a lot of games that I am actively playing and running that do that, but I really do prefer this kind of a style of game. You have tons of different optional rules in combat. You have major wounds. These are a lot of fun. If you take more than half your hit points in damage, you're really in trouble, because if you use this system, you can roll D100 on this table and find out what horrific thing has happened to you. Like if you rolled a 99, mutilated with vicious wounds, lose 1d3 points each from charisma, dexterity, and con. The character is unable to fight. It's pretty gruesome and graphic, which is also why you're going to see this next to a medieval war. But moving on, they have a different section on spot rules, and the spot rules, there's one thing in here that really I didn't like, and that was, it says it has mass combat, and it sort of does, but it's like 3 paragraphs. I was very disappointed with this. When I see a section on mass combat, I'm expecting some sort of way of like managing troops or abstracting troops into like hit points and units and ways of maneuvering them and things like that. That's not what this section is. It's 3 paragraphs. It basically comes down to make it up and shut up. Why did you even ask me if there's mass combat, you know? You can use either the resistance table to kind of simulate the push and pull of a battle. You can use opposed strategy rolls. I find that stuff is kind of boring, or they recommend that you do a series of smaller encounters with the player characters as a part of the larger battle. And that's fine. You can do that. That's a way that most people have done kind of mass combat, so to speak, for a long time, is that you just play out the game normally at the individual scale and you narrate what's happening around you. I don't really like that. Because there's so much more that can come out of mass combat that I think is really kind of interesting. Axe does this in the D20 system very, very well. But if in the D100 family, again, the design mechanism for a very, very low price of $4 can give you a PDF of ships and shield walls. And so this is the rules that they use in Mithras, which is compatible basically with BRP, because it's the same D100 family of games. They give you rules for seafaring and for mass combat that is similar to the individual scale combat rules, but you're dealing with formations of troops and blocks of troops in these differential roles of seeing how much did I succeed versus how much did you fail. This opens up different combat maneuvers, these command actions that allow you to do really, really cool stuff. And it's very simple. I think that PDF is like 30 or 40 pages. It's really pretty short. If I was to do mass combat using a D100 system, that is essentially what I would do and what I would use. And we love the design mechanism there. Great guys. Lawrence Whitaker is phenomenal. He came on our show and talked to us. It's a superior thing to this, but all of this and all of Mithras Imperative are under Orc license, which is excellent. You have rules for firearms, everything. There is a ton. And they do have, I believe, oh no, okay. I thought that because I was looking at a picture book that there was ships sailing on here, and that meant that there was sailing rules. But that's not what that section's actually about. But you've got all sorts of situational rules for underwater combat, volley fire, fighting in a vacuum if you're in space, sweep attacks, thrown weapons. Everything you could want pretty much is in here, and it's all very good. And the equipment section in particular is really good because you have tons and tons of tables of weapons from all these different eras, all the way up through like plasma and laser weapons later on. There's just a shitload of stuff to work with. You have spot rules for firearms, which is going to give you things for primitive, modern, and advanced, using malfunctions, loading revolvers, how that affects combat, reloading other firearms. You've got rules for automatic fire, tons, like I said, tons of tables of all sorts of stuff in here. It's very, very complete and exhaustive in this sense. You've even got artillery, ancient artillery. I think they've got modern artillery, robots and artificial intelligence, vehicles. There's just, so much useful stuff in here. You've even got space vehicles and stuff. This is all really, really good stuff. So you can use this. You absolutely can use this to run fantasy games. You can use it to run sci-fi games and pretty much everything in between. It's a wonderful toolkit for actually doing that. But the point is, you have to make the choices yourself. This is not a manual for people that just want to sit down and play a game. Again, it's like it's not a manual on how to do that. It's a manual on how to make your own manual. Basically, it's every different conceivable option you could want for a D100 system all in one place. How to actually game master a game, choosing your setting, how to actually teach the rules to people. And I think most of this is just going to come from the natural way that people get introduced to games, which is going to be to play the game, with people. And it's a little more difficult though here, because again, you have to come up with which optional systems you're using. And it's going to be a little harder to reference in this book just because there's so much shit in here. It's kind of a double-edged sword. And you have game master advice, and some of it is good and some of it's not so good, but that's a matter of kind of taste on my part as a game master and what I see as the goal of role-playing games and how the best way to run a game. It is pretty good though. This is worth reading for sure, even if you're just wanting to be a game master. And there's a whole lot of that stuff. The last part on how to make a setting and which rules and powers you might want to have available in a setting like a prehistoric age or an ancient world, the age of exploration, Arabian Nights, the Victorian age. They give you guidance on how to actually do this. So this is a really useful section for seeing like what kind of technology and skill sets should I actually have available to the players when they make characters. Towards the back, they also have the optional passion rules. These are excellent. Passions are a big part of Mythras and RuneQuest and other games, and I really think that this is something you should incorporate into any game that you're doing. It gives your character a little more depth, allows them to call on those passions in certain circumstances to get mechanical benefits. And in the supplement that we're working on with Mythras Imperative, passions are integral to the dark sorcery that we've created. So there's just a ton of things that you can use in this. And you've got creatures and antagonists and all of these statistics, things that are pre-made that you can use. They have fantasy creatures in here. There's enough to play a game in here. But more importantly than that, there is enough to design your own game. This is an excellent reference point. Even if you're not designing a D100 game, this really is a useful reference and an interesting way of thinking about different systems and different settings and how they all fit together. So I do recommend this book to people. It's just not going to be for everyone. It's going to be more for people who really like to tinker, for people who really, really want, and again, yeah, we've got tons and tons of characters and monsters and people to fight, run into, and use in your games. But this really is what it says it is. It's a universal game engine. It can be used to make anything, to simulate basically any genre within traditional role-playing game space. And I think for a lot of people, that's not going to be what they're interested in. And for those of you out there that say, like, I just want one system that does everything, that is this, but it's also not. Because this isn't just I pick it up and I play whatever genre I want at the moment. You really have to make choices here. You have to think about things. And for people who want to think about things, this is a good book and a useful book, but it's not something that I am going to recommend that everyone run out and buy simply because it's not for everybody. It's for people who want to make their own game, who want to make their own system, or at least take the D100 system and use it in a novel way or for a product or a setting that hasn't really been published. You know, it's great for all of that, but it's not great just to pull off the shelf and play. I really like this book. I reference it a lot, even when I'm working on the kind of Mythras stuff, simply because, you know, they're part of the same family. I'm really glad that I bought it and that I picked it up. And I think that you can get a lot of value out of this. You just need to know what it is. And it's a game engine. That's the important thing. Game engine. It's not basic role-playing universal game. This is a way to make a game. And if you want to make a game and you have no idea where to start, this is a good place because it's going to explain to you what all these systems do, what they might be used for, and see if there's something that you want to incorporate into your own game. So anyway, a little shorter than usual, but this is an excellent book. I do recommend it for the people that I've said it's for, but not more to the general populace. It is a fine book. I really love the construction. I wish more companies were able to create role-playing games to the standards that Chaosium does, at least on the physical product side. I wish I could do that at the moment, but publishing books is mighty expensive. And so thank you to Chaosium for making this game. They didn't sponsor this video. I'm not thanking them for that. It's a good book. I do recommend it. So for a score out of 10, I don't really know how to rate this. My gut says it's an 8, but then my gut tells me, no, that's too low because there's so much stuff in here that you can use. But then I'm like, no, that's too high because some of it is stuff that I hate. But it's, I don't know. It's an interesting book. I give it an interesting out of 10. An interesting out of 10 is the final answer on what Black Lodge Games thinks of BRP. But it is a fine product for the people that this is meant for. And if this sounds like something like you're interested in the D100 systems and want to make a D100 game, this is an indispensable resource in that way. Even if you're using something like Mythras Imperative as the base. I prefer that as the base of a game, Mythras Imperative, because it's opinionated. It's very opinionated, but it doesn't cover the same scope that this game does. And because this covers a larger scope, it can it by definition can't be as opinionated because it's trying to give you options for making your own opinionated game, an opinionated setting, an opinionated system. So great for people who want to design their own games. I would pick it up if you're one of those people. If not, I would just find the D100 game that you actually want to play. Like, so if you just like Call of Cthulhu and you're like, should I pick up BRP? My answer is no, because you've already got a good D100 game. If you're only looking to play a game, then Call of Cthulhu is fine. RuneQuest is fine. These are good games. This isn't really a game, though. It's only if you want that toolbox of things that you can use to make your own game is this a purchase that you should make. And if you're interested in Mithras, we do have our own Mithras Imperative project, Cults of Zahak, that you can still back on Kickstarter late right now. And don't miss all of our videos that we've made about Mithras, which is in this family of games. We've got a whole lot of videos on our channel about that topic already and more to come.